After receiving a distressing call from an informant, federal agents Aaron Falk and Carmen Cooper head deep into the Jiralang Ranges to investigate the whereabouts of their corporate whistleblower Alice after she mysteriously disappears on a company hiking retreat. When 4 more women from that retreat are recovered from the bush, each seem to be hiding something about their traumatic experience. As Falk and Cooper close in on the case, they uncover worrying details about the connections between these women and begin to fear for the safety of their missing informant as a storm threatens to halt the search. The Force of Nature, The Dry 2, is now available on DVD and Blu Ray.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
In each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is writer and director Zach Clark, whose film The Becomers has been making the festival circuit and is out now on VOD. Welcome to the show, Zach.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yay! Terry, did you disappear? Can you hear us still? Sorry.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'm having internet. It started to rain, so I don't know if I'm having internet issues.
You're very fuzzy. You look very fuzzy.
Am I okay?
I can hear you okay. Just your video sucks, but that's what I can still hear you.
It did just get better again, though.
Okay. Things paused a little bit, and I wasn't sure if it was on my end or what, but internet's been kind of weird recently, but welcome to the show.
Yeah. Happy to be here.
The aliens, the Becomers are with us. They are coming in. They are coming into the podcast recording. These times
that we live in.
Yeah, I tell you. All right, so for our listeners that might not know of it, can you give a little bit of a synopsis of The Becomers?
Yeah, The Becomers is, how do I describe it? It's a romance movie about 2 body-snatching aliens that come to planet Earth in the midst of a global pandemic and political upheaval and attempt to find each other by way of moving from body to body sort of across the middle of the country in a way.
I never thought that body snatching could be so romantic.
Sure.
So into it. And sexy. Oh my god, the sex scene. I was dying. Incredible. But so, there are so many things about this that I adore. Especially, I love romantic horror. It's so good. We don't get enough of it. And just getting body-snatching aliens in love and goopy and acid and gross, but also tenderness. It's just so neat. So why did you want to melt those two for this film? Like, kind of, what was the thought behind that?
Well, the real truth of it is that I wrote this movie in February, March 2021. So
Okay, cool.
Wasn't even a year into the pandemic. And my partner and I, during the pandemic, had watched all of original Star Trek and also Next Generation.
Oh,
okay. Which my mom loved, but when I started watching it, I was like, I think I had just seen the movies. I hadn't seen any original. Anyhow, I fell in love with it, and then it came time to write this movie, and it was written very quickly. So, The Becomers is really just an attempt on my part to capture what 2020 felt like in a movie.
Cool.
And what 2020 felt like to me is that the world is falling apart. People are terrible. I'm sort of in this cozy little sci-fi world with the person I'm in a relationship with. And it feels like us against the rest of the world.
That's quite fair.
It's perfect.
That is what it felt like, That is what it felt like.
No, I mean, sorry, Terry, not to get gushy, but my husband and I were trapped together and during the pandemic too, and I was watching this and I was like, this does kind of feel like what it was like. You have your cute, cozy little part of the world that's on fire, and I love the narration you have with kind of narrating their world's own bullshit, but also talking about their love through that. And it's one of these films where you can there is nice things when everything seems like it's falling apart. There's a little glimmer of hope. a little bit.
Well, yeah,
It's
there's
nice.
not to spoil too much, but there's that line at the end of the movie, which is that while our planet died around us, there was a love that saw us through. And that kind of is it. Like, that kind of is where that sentiment comes from.
The tragedy, though, is that the aliens should have picked a better world, because ours is slowly burning up as it is, too.
It's a very, again, not to spoil too much, but the end is a very, sort of imagines kind of a clean slate, in a way. The very last shot of the movie imagines that maybe they'll get a sort of fresh start by global takeover,
I'm here for it. I mean, they can't do much worse than we've done as a race.
Yeah. Anything different, as I thought many times, right? Just give me anything different.
But okay, so it's very lo-fi and it's very in the world, but you have some really great effects, and I'm just curious if you want to share, how do you do the eye things? Because I was impressed by the colors.
It is our incredibly talented post VFX artist Josh Johnson, who was brave enough to take on that job. There are some shots in this movie. There's some one take shots that are 2-something minutes long where he has to track the eyes the entire time. There's some long scenes with the eyes sort of in them the entire time. He did all that stuff. We did not prep for it in any way on the shoot. Okay. So the material that we shot was just actors.
Oh, okay. And they're like, you can't really green screen their eyes. Or anything.
No, they're not wearing contacts or anything. I had used I've used the sort of full lens contacts in a couple projects before. In Little Sister, we used them for a scene, and I know how awful they are to have in your eyeballs, and I also know how expensive they are. And we made this movie so quickly that you have to have them fitted to your exact eyes.
Yeah.
And so from a production cost standpoint and a timeline standpoint, it just wasn't feasible to track them all. And then I also always intended them to look like this, to look like sort of painted on. They're sort of designed to feel like they're on top of the image in a way, like an old Star Trek episode,
Yeah. Well, I think what really impressed me, and the reason why I had to know, is because there's a lot of times when we see stuff with eyes, like when they're wearing glasses, we won't see it. But there's one shot, at least, where there's one guy, I forget who it was, but he's looking onward and we're sort of seeing a side profile, and he's wearing glasses, but you can see the eye sort of off the side. And I was like, okay. That alone would have taken so much effort just to do. So I was really impressed with that.
Yeah. Like anything, it's just if you pay attention to the right details, it does a lot of work for you.
Yeah.
So cool. That's amazing. I am curious, do you have a favorite form that the aliens take? Do you have a favorite kind of moment that they go through in their journey at all? I know they're all probably your favorite, but I'm curious if there's one that particularly resonates with you.
I mean, I think, in terms of their creature physicality, or body they inhabit, or
the body they inhabit, and kind of the emotional beat that comes with that body, or the narrative kind of arc that they take with that particular body.
I mean, Molly Plunk, who plays Carol in the movie, who the alien inhabits for the longest period of time, is in my last movie, Little Sister, and she's the only person in the entire cast who I wrote a part for.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
So I wrote the movie knowing that she would be that character. And she was sort of our flagship alien. I think she's the sort of everyone look at Molly, look at what Molly's doing. But the sort of again, without spoiling too much, but the person Molly takes over after the person the alien takes over after Molly's character is kind of how I felt for most of the pandemic. That person. That person sort of embodies Molly's character has a bit of an adventure that she goes on, but then when she lands in the next body after it, it's that's sort of what the pandemic really felt like to me.
Wow. That's incredible. Holy cow.
Moping around a house, shuffling around a house.
Shuffling around, kind of being sweet, but also really depressed at the same time.
Walking into a room and just being what are you doing? You know?
I like your sweater, and then leaving,
yeah.
and you're like, hey.
Yeah, that was me. That was me during the pandemic.
But I also, you talked about like the flagship Alien, but I love how they all act alien, because it just reminds me endearingly of movies like almost like Coneheads, when you think about aliens trying to assimilate into suburbia. And I love how this film emulates that. So I was curious what it was like directing all of your actors when they had to be the alien, like what that was like to kind of get them to get the right cadence and the right vibe as the alien.
So a lot of their sort of like pauses and stuff were written into the script, you know?
Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Like
cool.
a lot of their sort of like cadences and when they choose to stop and think of what to say is all sort of written. If you read the script, there's lots of dashes and ellipses in the alien dialogue.
Cool.
But again, we made it so quickly that a lot of it was just sort of done by feeling it out, you know?
Yeah.
We had a day ahead of the shoot where as many people that played an alien came out and like hung out for half a day. But I mostly just told them, like, you're not in a rush. Don't rush through anything.
Okay.
I mostly just said, take your time. The spaceships are coming. You just have to kind of like lay low, and be human enough. And the other thing that helped is that every actor who plays an alien, their first scene would be with them playing their human character interacting with the previous actor that played the alien. So there was a sort of like baton pass of the performance.
Oh, yeah,
if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So no one had to be an alien without the advantage of seeing how the alien was performed before that. Does that make sense?
Oh, cool. Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. How quickly did you shoot this?
We shot for basically 14 days in the spring of 2021. It was the first turnaround was, it was literally about 3 months from the day I started typing the script to the day we wrapped that first shoot.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Incredibly quickly. And then we came back about a year later and shot 6 more days. And those days were almost all reshoots. Because we had burned through stuff so fast the first time, we just kind of needed to come back and fix some things and take the time. Be like, oh, we gave this scene 2 hours a year ago. Let's give it a day this time.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Damn.
I want to hear about your horror history, but before we do, I do have a question because the aliens seem to have maybe no gender, like they use they a lot in their speak. And then I think doing that framework kind of adds another layer to this, because we've seen body snatch films where, you know, maybe they will cross gender into a male body into a female body or whatever the case may be, but it's never really a point of it. But here it feels very purposeful with the fact that we get to hear sort of the narrator kind of explaining life on their planet and then melding with genders was that core in what you were doing, or how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was part of it. I think once you know that, or once I knew that the movie was going to be this central conceit that you're going to have these 2 capital C characters, but each character is going to be played by 4 to 6 actors each, you know? And that it was going to sort of be a picture of America during the pandemic. It would be a real failure of vision to just have, like, it's white people in their 30s, you know? So, you know, I very intentionally, you know, as somebody who believes that everybody should be able to love whoever they want, wanted to make a point of it by doing this thing, by having the entities themselves be what are attracted to each other and have it sort of removed from race, gender, age, you know, all this stuff. And their respective eyes are sort of pink and blue, and the alien who is in a, you know, female body for most of the movie has blue eyes and vice versa. It's all it's all there to point to the fact that that's what we're doing.
Heck yeah. I love that.
I love that.
All right, well, so take us back to the beginning. How did you get introduced to the horror genre or genre in general?
My mom loved Alfred Hitchcock movies.
Okay.
So from a very early age, I was watching stuff like The Birds and Psycho and Rear Window and all that stuff. It was sort of like, oh, let's have like a cozy movie night in, and we would come home with a Hitchcock movie or something.
Hell yeah.
That's my kind of cozy night.
Yeah. And then I was also just like a spooky kid. You know, like I loved like Count Duckula. And
Count Duckula
was like my favorite. I loved Count Duckula. And from like a very early age, like all my Halloween costumes were just like Dracula, the Mummy, the Wolfman. That was ingrained in me. I'm not even sure where from. I think it has to be from my mom and then her sort of like love of classical movies and classic horror and that sort of stuff. But I always just sort of like was always drawn to that material. I was always drawing skulls and, you know, I also from a very, very early age, like knew that before I even knew that I wanted to make movies, that came a lot later. But I knew as like a young child that like I loved Beetlejuice, and that Beetlejuice was like made by a man named Tim Burton, and he also made Edward Scissorhands. And then I knew that like Vincent Price was like known for being in old horror movies and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was your first horror movie? Do you remember?
I don't. I mean, it's probably technically like Beetlejuice, you know? It's probably something like that. Or Psycho or something, you know?
Cool.
I'm trying to remember, like, the first horror movie I remember seeing, not as a young kid, but being like, wow, that was like so scary, was the original Poltergeist. We rented it like a sleepover and just like
sleepovers.
And they just like watched all the Poltergeist movies. And then the other one I did not pick this movie today, but the other one that I really remember from sleepovers is whatever Hellraiser sequel has the guy that spits CDs out of his mouth.
Oh yes. Yes. Oh my god! I forget which one that is.
Oh fuck! Hold on. That's Cyber World or what? That's not. Is that the not? The, no. Hold on a second.
I don't remember which one it is, but I remember seeing that when I was in my teens.
Like, what's that? Well, this feels like too much. You know.
This is
I'll tell you, those Hellraiser movies get really out there and weird as they go on. I mean, there's like. There's a ton of them. There's so many of them. I've lost count of how many, but I love that.
I think it was Hellraiser Bloodline.
That sounds right.
That sounds right.
So yeah, it's the one that has Adam Scott in it, and it takes place. It's like it takes place across that like history. Anyway.
Oh.
Regardless, it's not good.
That's why it has CDs in it.
Yeah. Yep.
To show the evolution of history.
The digital world.
Yes.
Anyway, I had to figure it out.
You've it sounds like you've kind of had like a spooky upbringing from the very start with your cozy movie nights of Alfred Hitchcock and whatnot. Did movies scare you a lot when you were a kid, or what was your like scare tolerance as a child?
Well, I had this thing where I really loved scary things, like even if they were too scary for me. I like, as I was saying this, I also had this thing where I really loved spicy food, even if it was too spicy. So like, I remember really, really wanting the scary stories to tell in the dark books, you know?
Oh yeah.
And then we got them and I read them, but they couldn't stay in this. They had to be in the living room bookshelf. They couldn't be on the bookshelf in my room, you know?
Yes. Yep. Understandable.
And then I also remember like a movie like Little Monsters, which in theory is like something that, you know, as a kid who likes Dracula and stuff, you'd be excited about. And I really loved that movie, but I remember the end being especially terrifying and like a little too much. So yeah, I was super fascinated by it. I think my like, and you know, we'll get into this in a minute, but I also have like a sort of like, I have like a naturally born love for kitsch as well. You know, like I really loved like I really loved like the original Batman series and Pee-wee's Playhouse and stuff as a kid were also like very important to me.
So did you really like was Tim Burton like a favorite growing up for you?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, and I think it might honestly be through Pee-wee as well. That I like.
I was loved. You said Pee-wee, and then I was like, oh, it seems like the Tim Burton kitsch might be part of it too, because I loved that growing up too.
I think it certainly is, and this sort of like, especially those early Tim Burton movies are so in love with this sort of like 50s LA, and that sort of camp element, retro element that still you can find in Los Angeles when you go there. It's in David Lynch movies too. It's very Bob's Big Boy.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I thought of. Bob's Big Boy.
But so I think for me, it's like what I responded to about spooky movies, especially, not even just like, because it was much later that I was like, I like movies where people get stabbed, but like very early on, I was like, oh, a movie set in a castle, like that's fun, spider webs and stuff.
Yeah.
It has a very sort of like camp value, and I also don't use that word pejoratively for what it's
yeah
no
yeah
same. Well,
before we get into your pick really quick, what was the last movie that really scared you and that kind of reminded you of getting scared when you were a kid?
It's as an adult, I usually say that like movies don't really scare me that much. They're more like fun. And even like, I'll go to haunted houses around Halloween, and the actors usually have to like shoo me out of the rooms because I'm like, what's in this drawer? I'm just happy to be there. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm just happy to be there.
I'm just happy to be included.
But I actually, I really liked Longlegs. I found myself kind of taken with Longlegs, which I know might be a somewhat controversial opinion. But there's something uncanny about it.
I loved Longlegs. I loved it.
There's something like, what's alarming about that movie is like hard to put your finger on, and it doesn't have like twists and turns in like isn't this clever screenwriting way, but it just sort of like fucks the logic. And fucks the rhythms of a normal horror movie viewing experience to the degree that it's like the whole movie exists in an uncanny valley, and obviously Nicolas Cage's makeup is very uncanny valley, and the dolls are very uncanny valley, but it feels like Uncanny Valley the movie a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying to me.
It scared me too. I was like, I saw it, and then I was staying in a hotel, and I was like a little nervous in the dark, like a little bit. And like it's hard to make me feel like that now. Like I'm sure you have the same experience of watching as much horror. Like I thought it was scary. Whatever the hater, it always happens with movies like that are like they're so scary, and then everyone's like, no, they're not. You're stupid, and it's like, no, I actually was genuinely scared by that. Leave me alone.
Yeah, it's an alarming experience.
That is a great way to put it. It is an alarming experience.
Yeah.
Good for Osgood Perkins for making such an alarming experience. Jesus. Yeah. Well, Zach, we've talked about the Becomers in your horror history, but what movie did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
The original Little Shop of Horrors, the Roger Corman 1960 Little Shop of Horrors.
Hell yeah. So in the film, a clumsy young man working at a flower shop discovers that the strange plant he's been nurturing has an insatiable appetite for blood, forcing him to kill to keep it fed.
All right, so take us back, Zach. How did you see this movie? How old were you when you saw it? What about this movie terrified you? And why is this your Scarred for Life pick?
So I've always said that this is the first movie that I ever cried in. It's true. It's the first movie that ever made me cry. And I called both of my parents on the phone within the past 24 hours to try to get their take on this. But so we rented it from the video store.
Okay.
I think they were just like, well, we would go to the video store, they would let me choose what movie I wanted to see. This occurred to me today that there probably had to have been so much, I had to have gotten the sort of advertising from the musical remake by osmosis, right? So I might have even thought that that was the same movie, you know? Maybe because I was I was like 8 years old. I was 8 years old in 1990. We just went to the video store. I picked out this movie. I confirmed with my dad that it was the colorized version, which is what I remember. I remember it being the colorized version, which is on YouTube. I watched it today to prepare for this. And the huge thing I have with that movie at the end is I just remember, again, spoiler alert, Seymour feeds himself to the Seymour feeds himself to the plant at the end of the movie, and I just broke down in tears. Broke down in tears. And my mom had no memory of any of this whatsoever. She was like, I was like, do you remember when we watched Little Shop of Horrors? And she was like, is that the movie where they throw things? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, the movie where they throw things. And I was like, it's about a plant that eats people? And she was like, do they throw things at the plant? And then, 2 minutes later, we were able to discover that she thought I was talking about the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Throwing things at the screen. Yeah.
But I was like, what do you mean the movie where they throw things?
Do they throw things? You gotta give me something more to work with here.
What do you mean the movie where they throw things? Anyhow, God bless her. I love her so much.
Amazing.
Incredible.
But my dad had a much more vivid memory, and he was like, it was in this house. We were in the living room in the back. And he was like, I just remember you being like curled up in a little ball. Like you were trying to make yourself as small as possible. And thinking like it was really affecting you. And then I was talking to him about it today, and I was like, it was probably the first time I had ever seen anything where the protagonist didn't win. Where the evil wasn't overcome at the end, you know?
Yeah.
So like my little brain just like wasn't ready for it, you know?
Yeah. It's always funny when we've been doing this for almost 5 years now. And one of the big things that comes up a lot is that movie that changes things, where it's like, in your case, that you realize that the protagonist can die, or that, the good guys aren't always going to win. But there's always something that sort of like just goes, oh, this is not safe. This is not what I'm used to seeing in the past. And so I love that. I mean, I'm so sad for you as a little kid, but I love it.
That's fine. Totally fine.
You made it to the end and you were just like, not Seymour.
Yeah. I remember my dad didn't remember me like bawling, which is what my memory is. Mm-hmm. Which is that I was like inconsolable. He didn't really remember any of that, but he was like, "You really seemed shaken by it."
Wow. I mean, I have to admit that is a really cool reveal at the very end. I'm surprised to hear. I didn't know there was a colorized version of it. I watched it on AMC Plus, and it was black and white. It was kind of a crappy copy of it,
yeah,
but it was black and white. There's a lot of dirt, a lot of grain.
There's a not bad YouTube upload. I watched it pretty recently, like within the past few months, the original. But yeah, it's literally also this. So yeah, I did all my research. It was colorized in 1987. I know that from the YouTube link.
Oh.
It's a 1987 colorized version. So it also might have even been that like, it was like, oh, here's the new video at the video store, Colorized Little Shop of Horrors.
It doesn't surprise me because, Roger Corman loved to like try to make a buck and so capitalize off of the new movie, release it in color, put it out there, try to get attention on it. It makes sense to me. I did not realize. I always thought it was in black and white, so I did not realize that they'd even done a colorized version. But this was my first time watching this movie.
Oh, wow.
I'll be honest, for the longest time I didn't know that this existed. I thought the musical was the one and only version of this movie, and I did not realize that this is a Hairspray situation, or where it's like they had a movie, then they did a off-Broadway play of the movie, there was a musical, and then they made a movie of that off Broadway. Like the lines of it, I didn't realize this might be one of the first times that's happened. Now that I'm thinking about it,
yeah, it really is at the forefront of it, and it's also like usually when that happens now, it's like this movie was so popular, let's make a musical out of it. It's not like this is a very weird niche cult item, let's make a musical out of it.
I was surprised because I mean the box office didn't seem like it did great. I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that it like started to pick up steam as like a cult favorite. But this is not a movie that I would have ever expected them to turn into a musical, and I'm so thankful that they did, because I love the 80s. When did it come out? The 80s musical. I love it so much that it's really kind of cool to go back and see this and sort of see where the plot threads kind of started out.
Yeah,
and to see Roger Corman just having fun in this film. Like I really enjoyed this watch.
Yeah.
What about you, Mary Beth? Was this? Oh, sorry. No, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it was like reportedly shot in I think 5 days or something, maybe. It's a very
wild.
Like he was just that and like Bucket of Blood, which is another great movie from this time that stars Dick Miller.
Yeah.
Oh God. He was just churning out these sort of like 1 week movies,
and that I guess was his whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Just ultra low budget stuff, just like whatever he could do and get done. And obviously it stuck. Especially some things that he did. I mean, again, this like I feel like Little Shop of Horrors like changed at least like musicals and like that whole landscape, and which is very fascinating to think how Roger Corman helped shape perhaps contemporary musical culture, which is very funny.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen this either. I knew about it, but I hadn't seen it. I did know that Jack Nicholson was in it, which was why I was very excited to see this, because a young Jack Nicholson plays like the sadist patient that Steve Martin plays a version of that character in the musical, but Jack Nicholson plays a... So
Steve Martin played the dentist, and
it's Bill Murray.
Right.
It's Bill Murray.
Bill
Murray. Sorry.
Yeah.
My bad. Sorry. Got all my shit mixed up. But Jack Nicholson is in this as a weird little mortician who loves pain and getting his teeth worked on. Was this one of his first roles? Was it one of his first roles?
Yeah.
Or is it first role?
I think he'd done a couple movies beforehand. Because I saw this.
He pops up in this early Corman stuff quite frequently. He's in The Terror.
I didn't realize that. I did not know that. I am not the most fluent in Roger Corman. I know the basics, but I am not fluent and familiar. I have beef with Roger Corman a little bit, so.
What's your beef?
He just never treats his female directors very well and does a lot of weird shit with the movies that he has women direct. And I know that a lot of people are like, he supported women, like a lot of female directors, and I do appreciate that. But he's just there's just some weird stories about how he treats the women that he works with and how he likes to add a lot of rape to things when there doesn't need to be rape. So I just have a little bit of beef.
Yeah, that's all fair. That's all fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a complicated person, because
he's also an old white guy who made movies in the 60s. I get it. I know it was a different era. I understand, but anyway. I understand.
It's absolutely a fair, because he's just there's things that came out of him that has a lot of filmmakers got their start under working under a Corman production. Yeah. So there's a lot of great things, but then yes, there's some issues, particularly I'm thinking about Humanoids of the Deep. Duality of man. Yeah,
exactly. Let's appreciate 1968 earlier. Corman.
Yeah.
His stuff, I think the producing stuff certainly gets spottier, but his directing work in the 60s is some of the best stuff.
It's great.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I mean, we have a little mini-sode that we do where we talk about stuff that we've been watching recently. We did a run on horror comedies, and we saw Bucket of Blood, and that was one of I really enjoyed that movie. Dick Miller was great in it, and apparently because of that movie is why this happened, because they were given access to the sets that had been left standing for Bucket of Blood. And so they reused it for this movie. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That is pretty rad.
I also I saw this little factoid on Wikipedia that apparently it was distributed as a double feature with Mario Bava's Black Sunday. What a wild double feature that would have been.
Yeah, that's a great double feature.
Huh.
I can't even imagine
that's
it.
Totally wild, but I enjoy that. Which one came first is what I want to know.
Assuming Black Sunday. Assuming it's Black Sunday.
Double features, they need to bring that back. Well, I mean, maybe not with the length of movies that are today. It would be like a whole day at the theater, probably. So what I was surprised with this one is how much of the plot is very similar to the musical-ish remake of it. Like you could like see the character lines. I was like, oh, so this is the character that's played by Bill Murray, or oh, this is like I was really impressed by that. One thing that did throw me for a loop though was the kind of dragnet police aspect of it. Whereas coming from their perspective as like, well, this is a case, and it's like has like a dragnet kind of narration at the beginning, and we see the cops and they're
like
basically
really noir every once in a while. Like it kind of starts as a noir and then goes away for a little bit and then comes back. It's very, very. I was like, is this the right movie? I did actually check if I had pressed play on the right movie.
I mean, I'm sure it's in the same way that Bucket of Blood is just like a riff on beatnik culture. I'm sure a lot of it is just like, again, I can't imagine they took a long time writing the script. I can't imagine. So, it's, again, I know from experience, you just grab, you say, what's around, what's out in the culture.
Well, and it also, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes that also helps, like, oh, if I have a little bit of narration, like, introducing it, that might help us, like, in a script way. It's a kind of a loophole sometimes, too. So I can appreciate needing to do these things for budget reasons and for speed reasons. Because, again, he was just making movies, and we all know how hard it is to make a movie, and the fact that he was making so many movies. I know the system was very different and whatever, but still, like, I have beef, but I still respect and appreciate like what he created and what he was able to do with such little resources, and like prove the power of ultra low budget indie horror filmmaking. Like we have that today because of him. Thanks to horror.
I was sort of impressed when I watched it recently. It feels more sinister to me than the musical. Like it has like more of a mean streak. It has like a real true gallows humor.
Yes, it absolutely does. It I was surprised at the very first shot where he's feeding the kind of hand to it, and like a little chunk of meat falls out of it. I was like, oh, this is surprisingly gnarly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt the same thing, because again, like you get so used to a very specific, like kind of campy, silly, it's a big plant and it's like funny and he sings, but this one, it felt more like a creep show segment where it had that, again, I know this predates creep show, but it made me think a little bit of that creep show segment with Stephen King where he talks about meteor shit, of just like silly, but also dangerous. And I also feel like Seymour gets really into killing way quicker, and I feel like they really lean into like the murder of it all rather than instead of kind of the fantasy. I know obviously there's still fantasy, but I feel like this one isn't as like fantastical as what we've seen later. This is a little bit more grounded as you can be in a movie about a human eating plant. But yeah.
he like resigns himself to the homicides pretty quickly too.
Like, so fast.
I guess this is a thing I do now.
Yeah, like immediately gives him blood, and he's like, I can't do that. And then he's like, I guess I have to kill now. And I'm like, all right, cool, I love it. Like you're ready. You were ready to kill. We know how you feel.
It also is. The musical is millions and millions of dollars. It has, I think, the best special effect I've ever seen in it. And it's like hard to be scuzzy when you're spending that much money,
Yeah.
You can set it on Skid Row, but but when your Skid Row is a set you're building on the Universal backlot, it's a different thing than just like there's a field with tires in it over there. Why don't we go shoot a scene there? You know?
Yeah.
There's an abandoned old flower shop. Let's use it and pretend it's a real flower shop. Yeah, exactly. No, and that's a great point. It does have that grimier, grittier feel. Like it doesn't have that like musicalized version of a setting, but rather the actual kind of where it was initially set. And it feels, and even with the special effects being not bad, but still like 1960s, it just all feels so gritty and gross at the same time.
I actually bet that they're bad. I bet that they're bad special effects for the time that they're made. I was watching it and I was like, Outer Limits exists. The Twilight Zone
exists. That's true. That's
around
a good
this
point.
Time. There's definitely better special effects.
More complicated for sure. They definitely kept it pretty simple with Seymour. And you know what? I get it. For the most part, comparatively.
I think I was surprised that how... I mean, they're not great effects, but I was surprised how good they look because I was expecting, based on the little bit of research I did before I sat down to watch it, and it's like, they shot it really quickly. It was a very cheap production. So I was like, I was not having high hopes for the design of the creature, but it worked for me. I thought, it's not great effects, but like considering what they probably had to work with, I was pretty impressed.
Well, this is also sort of the tact that we took with the special effects in The Becomers. It's like they're cool and believable do not have to be the same thing.
Yeah, hell yeah, it's so true.
like I wanted everything to look cool. I was less concerned with if it looked believable. Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
I think what I love so much about, especially these sort of early B movies from this era, is that because they're so cheap, because they're shot so fast, that a lot of them kind of have this starkness that has a power to it. Sort of by virtue of what they lack, they actually have this other thing. There's this sort of, again, this sort of like, it's not quite real, but it's not set in like a fantasy world, There's a sort of, and I really love this about not just horror movies, but like if you watch exploitation movies and stuff from this era, they all sort of have this sort of starkness, this sort of like, oh, this room just has a bed and a nightstand in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's a good way to put it. Starkness. That's a good way. I was trying to think of a word to describe how this felt versus what I had seen before, and stark is a really good way. And it does have that exploitation movie, like a little bit of grittiness and vibe to it. I don't consider this an exploitation movie, but like you can feel the influence in there, especially when he's like, out hunting for people to murder for his plant. That's the usual.
As you do.
Also, was his mom, was Seymour's mom in the musical? I don't think she was, right?
She's not.
Okay. Because boy, oh boy, loved having this like little wild Oedipal mommy issue situation going on in here, and only ever eating things that are cures. And what's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? What does it cure? And I was like, oh my god, I love that the mommy issue is in this and like in the OG, and leaving that in there as well, and making him truly a weird little freak. Like they really make him like. Seymour is a weird little freak, and I love that. And they really lean into that here. Being like, no, he lives with his mom and loves his mom and is a grown man who does not know how to operate without his mother.
Yeah. I mean, Rick Moranis sort of plays him as like a lovable schlub who like falls into this thing as a victim of circumstance more than anything else. But yeah, he's a weirdo. He's a little creepy,
Yes!
When he resigns himself to murdering people almost immediately, you're like, I don't not get it,
Yeah, exactly. Like, I see why you do this. Like, I understand. You are kind of, Also, but like, what are you doing with this? I know he's like, I got seeds from a guy, but I'm like, what are you doing, you little freak, in the basement of like? I mean, he's a little plant weirdo, and that's, what, I respect it, but he just is a freak, and that's okay.
Speaking of the mom, I love that he sets her up to be like this fantastic cook when he's like, he's trying to figure out what to do with Audrey, and he's like, why don't you come over to my mom's house? She's a great cook. And the first thing they bring out is like something that tastes like it's cough syrup, basically. And it just goes from there. Epsom salt on one. Like, I'm like, I love that comedy, and I really liked Audrey in this movie. The way in which she misuses words, except like my favorite part is he talks about how I think he says that that Audrey Jr. is a foot long, and her response is, "Isn't it empirical?" I love the lines that she and to a lesser extent Mr. Mushnick, but like her misuse of words, or in that case, like the way in which empirical, like the empirical, I loved it. I thought she was really good, and I thought it was a good starting point to where it would go in the musical, and to sort of take it to the nth degree in terms of the accent and everything. But I liked her.
Did too. What a delightful film.
It really was. So the Buds opening was a moment that surprised me. I was not expecting it to be like, I was like, okay, we're building this up. We have this award that's coming. There's a bunch of people there. What is going to be the reveal? And the moment that the Buds open up and it's the faces of the people that he's killed, I was like, what a fantastic little visual gag, but also kind of a metaphor for like all of the trauma that he's been causing, coming back and literally being on display. I was okay. I mean, they didn't look the greatest, but I was like, I love that this is the reveal for this.
I remember those being especially disturbing as a child.
Oh, I bet.
God, as a kid, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of curious, like seeing it in the colorized version of it. Like I'm wondering how that would have looked, because again, it was the copy I had was so grainy and terrible.
They're just yellow. They just look yellow. Okay. In the middle. It's not like the best, it's not the most creative colorizing.
Yeah. But I mean, as a kid, that would have terrified me as a kid if I saw it.
And this thing that when Seymour's Bud opens up at the very end, I think you can hear him saying like, "Help me" or something. It's like not only did he feed himself to the plant, now he is sort of like trapped in the plant forever. As part of it forever, in a way. It's a very alarming.
But like, and especially again, like, nowadays we're used to like crazy gore, but again, in the 60s, I feel like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, like that kind of thing, even though it doesn't look great, it's still pretty shocking in terms of like gore and like expectations.
When you mentioned the sort of like little bit falling off of the hand, what year is Blood Feast?
1963.
Okay, so it's coming.
Yes.
It's around the corner.
Yeah, so speaking of the development of this, I found really interesting because the first screenplay that Griffith, who is one of the co-writers, he's the co-writer of this. Actually, I take it back. He wrote the entire screenplay. Charles B. Griffith wrote the screenplay, but the first thing that he wrote that he wanted to bring to Roger Corman was called Cardula, and it was a Dracula-themed story involving a vampire music critic. I would have loved to have seen that.
Sounds great. Sign me up. Where's that script?
Corman rejected the idea, so then he wrote a screenplay called Gluttony, in which the protagonist was a salad chef at a restaurant who would wind up cooking customers and stuff like that. And the quote is, "We couldn't do that, though, because of the code at the time. So I said, how about a man-eating plant?" And Roger said, okay. By that time, we were both drunk. So that's sort of the genesis of this.
Great.
And I love that.
Cinema.
I love the detail that it's a salad chef. World-renowned salad chef.
And then they just said, but then it's a man-eating plant, not people-eating plant. I'm like, what? Incredible. I love it. The creativity.
He just flipped the idea. He was like, what if a salad ate you?
Like, literally that. And that's great. That's so good.
Like, okay, all right. Salad chef, no. What else do I know? What else is in here?
Salad lettuce? Plant. Well, and I love there's this also quote attributed to Jackie Joseph, who played Audrey. later recalled, quote, "At first they told me it was a detective movie. Then when I was flying back to make the movie, I think they wrote a whole new movie more in the horror genre. I think over a weekend they rewrote it." And so she had signed on for one thing, and by the time she got back, it's a completely different movie. And I just, God, I love that. I just love the sort of like, let's think on our toes, let's get this done type of filmmaking.
Indie horror
delightful.
Filmmaking, baby. I mean, that just sounds like a story I've heard a bunch of times recently of people being like, yeah, we started with one movie and ended with something completely different.
It happens. It happens.
It does. It sure does.
The title that it was written under was The Passionate People Eater.
Oh, that's good. I do like that. But I do think Little Shop of Horrors is a better, catchier title.
Absolutely.
Passionate People Eater might get weird religious connotations, and we don't need Audrey Jr. thinking he's the second coming of Christ. Anyway. Is there anything else you want to cover before we give us our rating out of 5?
The only other thing I'll throw out there might be because I had just spoken to both of my parents before rewatching this movie, but I was like, it's sort of about the like terrors of parenthood. You know, he has that line like, "I raised you from little seeds." You know, this like thing that you grow that keeps needing things and taking things and wanting more and more.
Wait, that's such a good point. It really is though. And like, cause again, like he literally starts like feeding him his own blood and like, you know, let's say almost like breastfeeding. I know they don't make it look exactly the same, but it kind of has that start. And as, you know, the never ending mouth yelling for food and sustenance and never thanking, and then you eventually are consumed by it yourself. Like, wow, shit, huh?
Yeah, it did. That's what sort of like I took out of it as like what if this movie is about anything, and I don't necessarily think movies have to be about things.
No, but
it was like what sort of, you know, all horror sort of touches on like some sort of very primal thing, you know. And this movie, I think it might be parenthood.
I know. I think there might be something to that too, because at one point with Mr. Mushnick has Seymour call him dad, and all of a sudden it's like there's this idea of like, as long as you're doing something good for me, you can call me dad, because the moment he kind of messes up, he's like, you can't call me that anymore. And then in the next scene, once like Audrey Jr. is back up and running, he's like, yeah, I'm his dad. And so like there is a weird thing about family there that I didn't even think about until just now.
And you don't think about it in like the one that everyone's seeing, because it's so much about the romance, but this one is very like Mr. Mushnick, and like that relationship I think is so important to this movie, and like this weird like father-son weird boss relationship is really cool.
Yeah,
cool.
I mean,
like interesting in how it functions.
The musical is sort of about like fame run rampant, you know, and sort of like lengths people will go to for success, you know, and that's coded into this one too. But it's not it wasn't the thing I found myself sort of taking away from it.
Yeah, I would agree, definitely.
Cool. Because there is a little bit of this consumerism or capitalism in here, where it's like, you know, the plant, you got to keep feeding it and giving it your own blood, because you got to keep that money machine going. And so eventually it's going to destroy you. Like there's a little bit of that here, but I do think it's more pronounced in the musical. I think that's more of what that musical is kind of digging into too.
How old was Roger Corman? Had he had a kid yet at this point?
Oh, I don't know. I actually don't know.
He was born in 26. And he had a daughter, Catherine Corman, but I don't know when she was.
The plot thickens.
She was born in 75.
Never mind. Well, still. Well, do we want to wrap this up and give this our rating out of 5?
Sounds good to me.
All right, Terry, you're up first. How many Audrey Juniors out of 5 do you give Little Shop of Horrors 1960, directed by Roger Corman?
You know, it's funny because Little Shop of Horrors, the musical, is one of my favorite movies. I love that movie so much. I have been controlling myself to not burst into song on this episode, just because I love it so much. It was very informative of me as a child, combining like a lot of my interests that I didn't even know I had at the time. So that movie to me is like, it's perfection. I love it. So I was sort of like, I'm not sure what to think about this when I went into it, because I was like, it's Roger Corman, it's 1960s. It's not the same kind of caliber of a film that the musical was. And yet it's very earnest, and there's a lot to love here in terms of the way in which the actors kind of came together. There's a lot of ad-libbing from what I understand in here. I was really taken back by it, and I gasped at some of the reveals, particularly with the blossoms. Like, I was not expecting that. So I really enjoyed this. I'm going to give it, I think, 4 Audrey Juniors out of 5. It's not going to hold a candle to my 5 out of 5 for for the musical, but I still really enjoyed it, and I'm so thankful it's here because it gave me one of my favorite musicals of all time. So there's that. What about you, Mary Beth?
I'm gonna give it 3.5 Audreys, so I'm just gonna cut Audrey in half. I liked it. I see where everything started with this, and I'm glad to have seen more Roger Corman. I am very woefully undereducated, so I'm glad to start, seeing more of his films. And I've always appreciated, but just seeing more of his actual filmmaking rather than just the producing side. So I enjoyed it. I think if I watched the version I just found on YouTube that was clearer so I could kind of better understand what was going on, it would probably be a 4. So let's just say it's a 3.5, but the version I saw on Tubi might be a 4 if I get the 4K version or 180p version that I see on YouTube. But Zach, you have the final word. How many Audrey Juniors out of 5?
Gotta give it 5. Gotta give it all 5.
Hell yeah.
Gotta give it all 5. 5 for the colorized version from 1987 that's on YouTube. Either one. I was, as a snooty film person, was like, well, all right, well, that's the one I watched as a kid. I don't know, colorized version's kind of fun. Give it a spin. Why not?
I
give it a spin.
Watch it now. Now that I know. Now that I know it exists, I want to go watch it because, again, the copy I have, it was put through the ringer. It was, and I'm really surprised because it was on AMC Plus, but it was put through the ringer in terms of quality. So I kind of really want to go check out the YouTube version because of Zach.
It is notoriously public domain as well. So I think anyone can do anything with it. Which is why it sort of exists in all these different versions.
In all these different forms, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Zach, for joining us to talk about this fantastic movie.
Of course.
Where are you online? Where can our listeners find you? And the floor is yours to plug away.
I am on Letterboxd. It's the only social media I have left. As
Heck yeah.
Zach_Clark. You can keep up with all the garbage that I watch. And yeah, The Becomers, I think is probably going to be out on VOD by the time this is out in the world. Blu Ray is out as well. Should be out in the world as well.
Cool.
Heck yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, listeners, you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. What was your experience with the original Little Shop of Horrors? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us on social media. I'm at MBMcAndrews on Twitter and at MB.McAndrews on Instagram.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful everywhere.
And please don't forget to follow the podcast on socials. We are at Scarred Podcast on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Scarred for Life Podcast on Instagram.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, we do have a Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.